New colours and league's most talked about deal.
Yeah, it doesn't feel too bad actually.
The Roosters won the Fittler signature with the pay packet believed to be more than $700,000 a season.
It'll pay the bills.
It's a handsome deal.
The Australian captain rejected offers from Manly and Illawarra, preferring a long contract under his friend and Roosters coach, Phil Gould.
You know, I like to stay at a club and, making me home sort of thing, so I hope the next 5 years will be good ones.
Super League club Penrith claims he is still contracted to them for 1996, but the ARL-aligned Roosters say legal advice has cleared the Fittler signing.
Wow, Pete Overton reporting that story as well. That must have been a big day. So we've done the calculations, $1.4 million in today's economy.
They undercut me too. Good times. They were great times, actually. I think that was actually the day after we had a night at the cricket. And there was Ginge, I think it was Packers box. We went up there. Gus was there. That was a funny night.
Did you have was it a large night?
It was a large night.
So were you hungover doing that press conference?
I don't know if I was hungover.
I was still maggot, see his eyes. What was that brown paper bag doing next year?
I can't believe how big my head was.
Yeah, it looked a little bit.
I've shrunk.
I love the voice as well. It's a very different.
It's over to you. Let's talk the Super League War.
95 Super League. Well, Matty, it started a little bit earlier. It's just I get asked this a lot about why it began and how it began and the rest of it. Now, some years earlier, Channel 10 went broke. They had the Rugby League rights. Kerry Packer then came in, owned Channel 9, and bought the rights off Channel 10, who went into receivership for $24 million, which is not a lot of money, but it saved the NRL, Australian Rugby League at the time. Now, in 93, that deal was then renegotiated, a 7-year, $70 million deal. So it was $10 million. That's not we look at what the broadcast rights are worth now.
Incredible. And I remember at the time people going, wow.
Yeah.
That's big money.
So what ended up happening then, at that point, the $10 million a year was also inclusive of this thing that nobody had really knew much about, but we'd heard America had it, called pay television. So you got not only free-to-air rights, but the pay TV rights for that.
Did anyone say, oh, that won't work?
Well, no one really bothered about it because it wasn't even in Australia at the time. In 93, there was no pay TV. Then a couple of years later when it began, and began with, obviously, the Murdoch beginning off with, I think it was a Galaxy or something back then it was called,
Yes,
I think, originally.
It was.
And anyway, and when he was setting it up, they said to him, there's two things that you need here when you're going to set up pay television. You need a good movie channel and you need good sport. And he said, righto, what's the go? And when they looked into sport, well, Packer's already got the pay TV sewn up, so you can't have rugby league. And he said, oh, well, I'll just get rugby union. And his advisor said, look, you can't, you have to have rugby league. So then they had to come up with a strategy about, well, if I need rugby league and I can't get rugby league, what can we do? So the strategy was, let's go create this Super League, which is going to have the best of the best. And the NRL had just gone into a 20-team competition. And their idea was, let's just have a 10-team competition, but how do you get the best players who are already contracted to the ARL clubs? He said, well, let's just sign the clubs over, and they can, because the way the contracts work was Parramatta had a deal with the New South Wales Rugby League as it was back then, the Australian Rugby League as it was, and the players had the contract with Parramatta. The players didn't have the contract with the league. So what they did was they wanted to start a new league and they wanted to get into then the Parramatta would put a team in the Super League and a team in the Australian Rugby League, which would essentially be the reserve grade team. Anyway, so that was the original premise. There was the blitzkrieg then in April, Matty, as we all know. So this all started in 95. It was getting around at the time. The NRL in 95 expanded to 20 teams. They brought in the Warriors, the South Queensland Crushers, the North Queensland Cowboys and the Perth Reds. Now, I was on a flight, the very first round, I was on a flight. The NRL chartered a plane. We all flew to New Zealand for the Friday night game. Saturday morning, we flew to Brisbane to watch the Crushers play. Straight to the airport on the plane, flew to Townsville to watch the Cowboys. Next morning, we flew to Perth. So all four new teams and all the media were around, and a lot of club NRL sponsors.
I still have a hangover on the Monday.
Yeah, jet lag.
Saturday night, I think the Mad Cow was going back then, Matt. Yeah. It was small then, but anyway. But it was on that flight, my boss, I was working at Sun Herald at the time, my boss, my sports editor, actually went up to Ken Arthurson on the flight from New Zealand and said to him, listen, I've got to let you know, we're running a story tomorrow saying that this Super League idea might be going ahead. And this is in March. Arco he sort of sat back a little bit, sort of resigned. I was standing next to him when he told him. And he said, I thought this was coming.
Right, yeah.
So it had been around. Now, then the News Limited and everyone had spent the next couple of weeks denying it was going to go ahead. And then one Saturday night, actually, the Sunday Telegraph lobbed on our desk over at the Sun Herald, and it had sign. There was all these little pen pick.
All the great players, but wouldn't it?
Laurie Daly, Brad Clyde, Ricky Stewart, Mal Meninga, Steve Renouf, Alan Langer, and it had begun. And that set off. So what happened? That was when the blitzkrieg happened. That's when Super League strategically sat there and they spent that weekend locking up Canterbury, locking up Canberra, they tried to lock up Brisbane. Brisbane they lost a little bit of control of, but they locked up the Warriors, the Cowboys, all those teams and signed them in, but they didn't, it fell apart because they didn't get the Knights because there'd been a hold up at Wayne Bennett at the Broncos had got upset that he'd been revealed as signing without actually having signed yet. So he got a bit and said, oh, well, hang on. So they had to hold up and try and convince Bennett, hang on, mate, we're not doing the wrong thing here. That cost them getting the plane to Newcastle and signing the Knights up, which was the next cab off the rank.
And they would have tried to get to these two.
Oh, they were after
Joey and Matty.
There was three players they cared about in Newcastle. Yeah, Joey, Matty, and Chief. That was the only. They didn't really care about the rest, to be honest. But they knew Newcastle was crucial to the battle. So that's what they got to Newcastle late. But now by the time they got there, I understand you were off saying this. You blokes had already spoken to Phil Gould.
No, it was. I'll tell you what happened, Kendy. So when it first broke, I'm driving to Marathon Stadium, was known then, and I look at the billboard out the front of a news agency, and it's signed. And we're like,
what's this? Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Now, the club had given us no indication that this was going to go ahead, and they gave us absolutely no indication which way they wanted us to go. For us, it was a total mystery. So we're playing the Tigers the next day at Parramatta Stadium, the Balmain Tigers, when they had that as the home ground. Yeah. So we jumped on the bus, and we're all sort of going, what is this? And Malcolm really sort of said, oh, look, I think it'll be something that'll blow over in a couple of days. You know, there'll be I wouldn't worry about it. We've had a great start to the year. Let's focus on the game. We get off the bus at Parramatta at our hotel, and we go in, we have another meeting, because by the time we're on the bus and coming down, this thing is just starting to snowball and getting bigger. Again, Malcolm said, look, the club have given us no indication which way they want to go. In hindsight, I'm certain at that stage, they're thinking to themselves, listen, we want to go with Super League here, because the Knights are in financial chaos.
Yeah.
And the thing that I believed, that they believed, I think would allow them to go to Super League, was if they'd have put their hand up straight away and said, this is where we're going to go, there could have been a public backlash in Newcastle. But instead, I reckon our players, we were probably the worst paid players in the league. At that point, Joey's on $15,000. I'm on $20,000. And I think once they knew that we'd sit down with Super League executives, the money that they would offer us, we just signed on the spot. So on the night before the Tigers game, we have another meeting at the hotel. Again, Malcolm really reiterates to us, we've had a great start to the year. Don't worry, this Super League thing will look after itself. Go out and win this game tomorrow. What happened when we went back to our hotel rooms? Pandemonium breaks out. Believe it or not, the player managers descended on the hotel.
What, they didn't stay out of it?
No. Like, you've got no idea. Yeah. So, mate, there were about 4 or 5 of them, and they've just come and they're banging on doors. Now, apart from Chief and maybe 1 or 2 others, we had no managers. You know, we thought that it was, the high brass, the top that had the player managers, and we just looked after.
Well, not every player had them back then.
No, they didn't.
No.
So they're banging on the doors, trying to get into rooms. They're ringing non-stop on the phone, and myself and Andrew were rooming together. We got about 4 or 5 calls from 4 or 5 different managers, and one was really bullish. He was saying, "Now listen, I represent Super League. Boys, if you don't come with me and sign in the next 10 minutes, you're going to be left out of the loop. Have you seen the money being passed around? I'm telling you, sign with me. You're going to be offered a contract, and it'll be all sweet. But he said, if you knock me back and you've got 10 minutes to make your minds up, he said, I think that there's a chance your career could be over.
Trying to put the heavies on you.
So I've said to him, I said, mate, look, we're in bed trying to get ready for the game. It was about 10:30 at night. I said, well, where are you? Where do we go to meet you? He said, go to your window. He said, pull back the blinds. You see the McDonald's across the road? He said, you see the bloke standing in McDonald's behind the glass there? See him waving? That's me.
Do you want fries with that?
Oh, mate. So we ring a football manager, Robert Finch. He comes through and said, mate, this is what's going on. He said, mate, they're bullshitting you.
Yeah.
They're trying the heavy tactics.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. He said, I've told the hotel if any of them come through, to stop them coming in, certainly to stop them going up to the floor and knocking on doors. And he said, every single call that comes in is going to go through my room to get a good night's sleep playing tomorrow.
But the thing is, Matt, they probably weren't bullshitting you.
No. Well, yeah.
Just to go through it, you hadn't represented at that point, had you, 95?
No.
So,
No.
But the players, the Raiders and the Broncos, particularly who dominated the era, Laurie Daly, Clyde, Ricky Stewart, Alfie, they signed on for 100,000 sign-on, a lot of them, and then 600,000 a year. Now, this is in the time when the salary cap of clubs was 1.8 million.
What, in 1995?
In 95, that's the figures that were released in court. Super League had to release in court. 100,000 sign on, 600, and Laurie signed I think it was a 5-year deal. Brad Clyde signed a 7-year deal. 600,000 a year for 7 years.
We got a phone call at about 11 o'clock at night that this Super League was going on, that we had to get in a taxi and come in now and sign, otherwise we're going to miss the boat.
It was a takeover by one of the wealthiest blokes in the world, Rupert Murdoch, News Corporation. It was no question about it whatsoever. The great thing about Super League was you knew the game of rugby league was special, because when you had the two powerhouses in Murdoch and Packer wanting this game, you knew you got a good product.
They laid all the cards out on the table, and for me, I chose that way. And one of the reasons why I chose that is because it enabled Canberra to survive.
I think I would have been one of the guys to jump ship. I don't think the Australian Rugby League was doing the right thing by the players. I don't think the players were getting their fair share of what they should have been.
The whole thing behind the Super League was pay television. There's no question about that. I mean, pay television was just coming into Australia, and naturally they needed sport to get customers.
We had two media empires fighting for the right of this game, which we should have stopped immediately.
We all loved rugby league. We thought where it was going wasn't the correct way, so we wanted to take it another way.
There were a lot of broken friendships and a lot of heartache, and a lot of things happened that should never happen.
There were lies, deceitful people everywhere, massive amounts of money being splurged. All the money that the ARL had ever saved, the New South Wales Rugby, thrown out the window.
All I was personally thinking about at the time was the incredible waste of money, the incredible time, the incredible split of the fabrics of the game that were never ever going to come back.
The worst thing that happened, of course, was the damage it did to the game of rugby league.
Gus, I remember in the 1994 season, it started all these whispers going around that there were a number of clubs that had met. And generally they're the out-of-Sydney clubs. There was talk that it was Canberra, Brisbane, the Knights, and a few other clubs had met. Just about a little bit of discontent that was happening. And, the possibility, I mean, it sounds outrageous, of this, forming a rebel league and breaking away. And it was so unlikely. I mean, I'll say to you, Freo, can you imagine if you heard a whisper that, mate, Collingwood and Carlton are getting together and they're thinking about breaking away from the AFL? You just go, that's fanciful. It's never going to happen. Anyway, this sort of started to bubble along a little bit. Anyway, at the back of the 1994 season, it was sort of the noise was getting louder and louder, and it was Kerry Packer that stepped forward. Kerry Packer came forward and said, look, this is what I'm hearing what's been going on. Basically, if anyone tries to break their ARL agreement, I'll sue the pants off you and put everyone back in their box. But as it turned out, there were a number of clubs that were still sort of working behind the scenes. And I remember the week before it broke on April 1st, on April Fool's Day. And the week leading up, there was talk going, mate, there's talk that this rebel league's about to happen. And by the time it really broke on the Saturday morning, the Canberra Raiders had signed, the Bulldogs, a lot of the Bulldogs players had signed, and the Brisbane Broncos en masse had signed to go to this Rebel League. And everyone, we were completely in the dark. We went down to the hotel. Now, the Newcastle Knights at that point were non-committal. They were a club then that didn't have a lot of punch. We were just at the beginning of our really sort of a good era for us. And so we didn't have a lot of punching power as far as our administration was concerned. And that, to an extent, they were left out in the dark. So we go down to the hotel, and as players, we're getting calls from player managers and Super League representatives, ARL representatives calling our hotel rooms, just going, come across here, mate. There were player managers ringing me and Andrew because we didn't have a manager at that point, saying we're staying at Parramatta, we're across the road at the McDonald's. Come across, sign with me, and I've got a Super League contract waiting for you. It was just out of control.
In the end, you decided to stick with the ARL. What was your thinking there? What was the pros and the cons for both sides of this war?
Where most clubs were guided, our administration at that point were like, hey, we're going to leave it up to you guys. Now, look, deep down, I think they believed that once we met with the Super League representatives and they with the money they were going to offer us, and as far as pay rise were concerned, I think the club thought, okay, what they're going to do, the players will agree to go to the Super League, then the administration will put their hands in the air and go, well, what choice have we got? The players have made the decision, that's where we're going to go. But what had happened, the Super League sent a couple of representatives, and we sat and negotiated, but no one signed anything. Everyone was like, wow. And it was Paul Harrigan said, mate, I think we just owe it to the ARL to listen to them. And so the ARL the next night sent Phil Gould. Now, the Super League representatives were solicitors, lawyers that went, which had no impression. We were young guys. Had no impression on us. You know, all we saw were the dollar signs from them, where Phil Gould really sat down. And there was a fair bit of fear as well. He was like, guys, there's no guarantee this Rebel competition is going to get off the ground. You know, I remember him saying that the thing that really had an effect on me was that some of us were right at the beginning of our career and really just starting to get some traction in first grade and starting to make a career of ourselves. And he said, you know what, if you sign with this Rebel League, guys, you know, I hate to say this, but who knows, Ricky Stewart and Laurie Daly might have played their last ever game of rugby league. Oh. And we all went, whoa. Anyway, at that point, our CEO walked into the room and Gus saw him and went, hey, you, come back here. You're the CEO of this club. What do you want? Which way do you want the players to go? And he went, in a moment of panic, said, we're happy with whatever the players do. Now, I think deep down they wanted to go Super League, I think.
Yeah.
And Phil Gould said, righto, everyone, raise your hands if you want to stay with the ARL. I think me and Andrew were just about the only ones who didn't put our hands up because I was like, no, I'm seriously undecided. I don't know which way to go. But everyone went, yep, everyone went in, sort of started signing with the ARL, and we went, well, if the boys are doing it, let's do it because as I said, we're at the beginning of a great era. We're all best mates. I don't want the Knights to break up. I don't want to have to go play with someone else. I want to play for the Knights. So we signed the ARL.
Wow.
So, Matty, when you're involved and your brother and so forth, there's normally some sort of funny story that'll come out of any sort of situation, you know, whatever situation you find yourself in. Is there any sort of story that you remember from that era that you go, wow, that was funny in a time that was, obviously at the time was hugely stressful for everyone?
There are a lot of funny stories. One I'll tell is that where we met the Super League guys was upstairs at the club, right, at the ground. There used to be a bar up there, upstairs at the club. And a little bit like our meeting place here at Triple M, in that one of the offices is transparent. You know, it's just glass. It's a glass office, so you can see straight through it. Well, the Super League representatives, once they gave us the cell, they said, we want to sit down with every player individually. Now, they said, what's really important, guys, here is confidentiality. I don't want you guys to go away and talk about who's been offered what. Now, the first guy who went in, and we're all standing at the bar with a beer, and we're watching our first guy go in, and he was a young back rower who at that point was on $25,000 a year. He goes and sits down with the Super League representatives, and we're looking at his face, and he all of a sudden has this massive grin on his face, right? And they've told him, now listen, this is what the offer is, but this is confidential. Don't tell the others. Well, they're watching him as he walks straight out of the office, walks up to us and goes, "Oh, they've just offered me 350 grand." At which we all start smiling, and they just, one of them literally fell off his chair. Just went,